From awaytogarden.com and robinhoodradio.com, this is A Way to Garden with Margaret Roach, your weekly invitation to dig in and grow.
When I saw on social media the other day that my friend Gala Trail, a.k.a. You Grow Girl, was planning a new book that she hopes to self-publish with funding via a Kickstarter campaign, I was curious. And then when I clicked over to have a closer look, it turned out that the book Gala's writing is actually called Grow Curious. Gala's subtitle is Creative Activities to Cultivate Joy, Wonder, and Discovery in You and Your Garden. And that's exactly how I describe the approach she's always taken to her pursuit of plants and making of gardens over many years. She's not just horticulturally expert, but also creatively crafty and a great cook who also puts up the harvest in inventive ways for off-season use. In other words, engaging with every dimension of what the garden has to offer, savoring every drop. I invited her back to the show today to compare notes on the postmortems of our 2016 gardens, because I think fall's the best time to do that and lay plans for your garden in the year ahead. And especially she's here to tell us about some curious herbs she grew and how she's creatively overwintering and stashing and, of course, using them. So hello, Gala. Welcome back.
Hi, Margaret.
Oh, my goodness, my goodness. I love the idea for the book. I don't just like it. I love it because, of course, that's how I feel, is that it's all about joy and wonder. And, to me, the garden is a constant companion that entertains and fascinates me. So.
And I also think, for me, one thing that I discovered over time as a gardener is that it teaches me about myself.
Yes. Yes, it is. It's the big, it's for me, it's like therapy.
Yes.
Yeah, but we don't have to go into that too much.
No.
So let's start with the idea of the garden, though, as a curiosity fueler, which, the other day you posted a photo and a story on yougrowgirl.com of a particular spider, a really cool-looking spider, and what you'd learned about it and other spiders by following your curiosity when you saw it and so forth. And it was weird because I had just seen and photographed the same species here and done the same exploration. So case in point, right? It can even be a spider.
Yes.
The new book comes from a childhood memory of yours, I think, and I think it's meant to maybe encourage us to regain a childlike inquisitiveness, like looking at the spider and wondering about spiders. Do I remember correctly?
Yeah, that's the gist of what I was getting at. It's interesting to me because I noticed that in the garden and nature world, as far as books go, there are lots of books that are for kids to engage them with the garden in a particular way.
Right.
To engage their curiosity and sense of wonder and discovery and learning. But I don't see books like that for adults.
I know.
And I think that a lot of adults end up coming to the garden in that way through their kids. Mm-hmm. Because kids have permission to be playful in a way that, I don't think this is necessarily our intent, but a lot of the garden world ends up focusing on productivity and aesthetics.
Yeah, sort of outdoor decorating and work, getting your chores done. And I know I'm guilty of telling people to do their chores too. And then sort of outdoor decorating, like, oh, does it look pretty? Does it look pretty? Right.
And all that's a part of it.
Right.
It's not to be denied. It's just, I think, sometimes what ends up happening is it pushes all this other stuff aside.
Yeah. And it makes you feel like you have to really perform at a high level, both productivity and, it's not beautiful enough. I can't have people over. I don't want them to see it. It's not perfect. You know what I mean? That perfection cult, that's not a good thing with nature, probably. So
exactly. It was interesting for me personally when a number of years ago I really started letting go, letting things be messier.
I remember that. Actually, I remember you wrote a beautiful essay about that.
This is what when I talk about how the garden ends up teaching me about myself, it's like it was very interesting to see what happened psychologically for me personally when I started to let things go and be messier in some ways, how it really sort of got at stuff in my head. But also, on the flip side of that, it was really interesting to see how the garden performed.
Yeah.
What happened within the garden as I observed it when it was messier. I mean, the garden, nature doesn't really care about that stuff.
Well, no, perennials don't cut themselves back in the fall and rake themselves up, rake around themselves in the spring. Do you know what I mean? I mean, yeah.
No, that's all our anxiety.
Exactly.
And our needs.
Yeah,
so it's like the more I let go, or was able to let go, I noticed that there were more pollinators in the garden.
Yeah.
More insects in general, and good insects, like that things sort of, balance themselves out. So it's funny because one of the anxieties I hear from gardeners, especially new gardeners, is about, I didn't get to keep things as clean as I wanted to.
Yeah. It's not, again, it's perfect, that culture, like cultivating perfection, which is a ridiculous goal when you're dealing with living things, living plants, and a habitat, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The fact is, it's fine.
Let it all hang out, baby.
Yeah, you may have some issues with your neighbors, but, or at least I will.
Yeah, you know me, I don't have any neighbors, but that's okay.
Yes.
So with an eye to being more curious and creative kind of going forward, dare we kind of look back at the highs and lows of the gardens we're teasing apart right now as we start our cleanup? What were some of the high points? I think you mentioned to me, or maybe I read about it on the blog, like you had a greens bonanza. You had a whole thing with greens going on that I think was a victory for 2016, yes?
It's funny because for years I've been saying, this year I'm going to be self-sustaining in greens. And I usually am to a certain degree, but never like I was this year.
Uh-huh.
And part of that, again, was really letting go in more so than usual in particular ways. Like, for example, letting more wild greens, so weeds, edible weeds, letting them do their thing. I mean, sometimes it meant that they came up in places I didn't want them, like in pathways, and if the plant was really healthy and was worth preserving, I just said, oh, well, and I let it be, and I was able to harvest so many greens this year. It was crazy. I mean, I was having friends come over, putting out the word, come shop in my garden, because I have so much in the way of greens, especially in the spring. But it ended up being through the whole season, and I'm still harvesting greens right now. So,
and we should say to people, you're in Toronto, so you're not in a warm climate where we would expect you to be necessarily having a prolific harvest at the moment.
No.
Yeah. So when you say edible weeds, like, for example,
lamb's quarter. Purslane is a personal favorite, although it's really a summer green.
Yes.
It's a succulent plant, very nutritious.
Yes.
And also tasty, has a bit of a tang. Mallow is what I'm still getting.
Oh.
Yeah.
Dandelion greens, maybe?
Dandelions like crazy. I love dandelions. That's definitely one of those plants. If it comes up in the middle of a pathway, I'll let it go for a while.
Right.
Especially because you can also harvest the root and use that too. So so much goodness to use from dandelions.
Right.
I had chicory that self-seeded last year, and so I had chicory everywhere. Again, though, you can use the root as well, and I have been. I've been roasting the roots of dandelions and chicory and using them to make a coffee-like substitute.
Mm-hmm.
Amaranth is another big one. There are wild amaranths that come up, so weedy amaranths that come up in the garden, but then I also grow callaloo. Which is a West Indian amaranth.
Mm-hmm.
I like that one a little bit more for eating. Mm-hmm. It gets huge, and if you let it self-seed, well, you'll have a gazillion, so I try not to let that happen. I'll always allow some self-seeding, but I try to keep it within reason.
I know. I have a few things that I have to I've got to get out there and get that before it lets go of its seeds, because that certain things are like, oh my goodness.
It's like finding that balance between letting things, do the work for you versus becoming such a problem that then you make more work. Yeah.
Right. Infestation, yeah.
So those are some of the wild ones, but I mean, on top of the wild ones, there are also all the ones that I cultivate, and then there are the ones that I did cultivate at a certain point, like lettuce, but I don't have to sow them anymore.
Right. So you let your lettuce self-sow. I have black-seeded Simpson, a lettuce that I like very much that I probably planted 20 years ago, and I have never planted it since, and I have it every year. It just sows itself, and it's wonderful.
Exactly.
And it knows exactly when to do it, and exactly when is the right weather, the right conditions. It's wonderful. It's so smart.
And I don't know about you, but I find that the greens that self-sow, especially the lettuce that self-sows, is tougher. It lasts longer.
Yes.
It doesn't bolt as easily.
Well, I think it puts down roots exactly when the right time has come. The soil moisture is exactly right. It's not like us forcing it to germinate at a time, by watering it, whatever. It's like it picks the right, it seems to pick the right time. And I don't mean to anthropomorphize the plants, but it just seems to know. So.
I don't know. Lately, I've been anthropomorphizing the plants a little bit more. I think that they have an intelligence that we underestimate.
Yeah, they're pretty damn smart. I guess you're right. So greens were a win this year. I've already mentioned on the show that in 2017, for me, speaking of edibles, it's going to either be drip irrigation or no vegetables because we just had 2 years where it's just been really hard to keep things growing vigorously with limited rain that's been falling and, erratic rainfall. So that's one of the things I have sort of on my postmortem list is, I've got to invest the time and the supplies to do a proper drip irrigation in my raised beds.
And I can't I wanted to do that sort of thing in my garden, and I set out to do that when I first set it up, this particular garden 5 years ago, but I have very sandy soil.
Yeah.
And even though I work against that in the raised beds by always adding in lots of nutrition, compost, etc., it's still quite sandy, and so I find that just doesn't work for me because for the most part, the water just goes straight down and doesn't wick.
Right.
So I've been more and more just trying to embrace the reality of this garden where it is.
Yeah.
And sort of what happens. So I was really surprised this year, considering it was so dry and so hot, that I continued to have greens, and it was really about the wild greens.
Right, because
they are so adapted.
Right. So go with a palette of plants that would be like a takeaway from this year. For both of us, we've got to go with things that are suited to our conditions, even more so as conditions seem to be a little trickier.
Unless you want to be out there with a hose every day like my neighbors are, which is not good for the environment. So,
No, I can't do that.
And the great thing I find about the wild weeds is they're not only are they adaptable, but they're nutritious. And it's good to have that diversity in the diet. So It's a win.
So herb-wise, every time I look at your website, you're getting to know some new herb or using a familiar one in a way that I've never tried or even thought of, herb salts, herb vinegars, dyes, teas, whatever. You make pestos out of things I've never even thought of making pestos out of and so forth. So I wanted to kind of talk about some victories and things you're going to do again that worked, that were maybe newer, that you're going to do again next year. I think you've been growing turmeric and ginger, have you?
Yeah, that's something that I've done on and off over the years, and I did turmeric, ginger, and cardamom this year. So it was like a trinity of like ginger-like kind of spices because they're all similar in terms of how they grow and the kind of needs that they have. So the only plant I bought was cardamom because I don't know how to. You can't just buy cardamom root at the store. So I did go to a specialty nursery to buy the cardamom plant. And that was a big victory for me because I had a cardamom plant something like 15 years ago, and I rapidly killed it. So it was a big deal. This year, it's like, I know what it needs now. I figured it out. And I was successful. And then, so the turmeric and ginger, I grew both from roots or rhizomes that I bought at the store.
So like you went to the vegetable section and you bought some as if you were going to make a dish with them and you potted them up or you put them in the ground?
Yeah, I find the best place to get either of them is a health food store.
Yeah.
You can have some success with grocery store roots, but the problem is I think they spray them with some kind of inhibitor.
Right, so they don't sprout in the bins, right.
Yeah, they don't sprout as easily. So from the health food store, they sprout just on their own. I mean, I just put them in a fruit bowl on my counter with the rest of the fruit and whatnot, and they always just end up sprouting on their own. I don't have to do anything special to get them to. And then once they sprout, what I do is cut the sprouted parts off and let it harden over a bit like you do with a succulent.
Or like with a potato. If you were going to cut up a seed potato into two, you'd look for where the eyes are, and then once you cut it in half, say, for instance, if it's a big potato, you'd then let it heal over a little bit.
Exactly. I don't know how I didn't make that analogy, but that's perfect. Yeah.
You say one thing, I say potato.
So once they scab over a bit, then I just plant those. And both plants, I plant them together, typically in a really large plastic container because they really like it moist. And they tend towards shade. Now, I've talked to a lot of people who said they put theirs right out in the sun, and I think you can do that as long as it's tempered by having consistently moist soil.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for the most part, for me, I do best when they get a little bit of shade protection and aren't right out there in the blazing hot sun where they're most likely to, where the soil is most likely to dry out too quickly.
And so these plants are about, the cardamom is a pod, so it's not the below ground part that we're using. Is that right? Or are we using root?
Yeah, so with the cardamom, chances are good that I'm never going to get cardamom pods.
Okay.
I just don't have the climate for that here.
Right.
It's really more about the leaves, which you can use.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't know that.
They're very aromatic.
Okay.
They're aromatic like the cardamom is, and I love having that smell.
It's fantastic. It's an amazing smell. So with
it's the same with ginger and turmeric. You can use the leaves of those as well for cooking.
Oh, okay. And then the big harvest of those other two is the roots later on. But are you overwintering a portion of the underground roots for your start for next year, or what do you? Or are you overwintering this whole big pot, or what are you doing?
Sometimes. It depends on what I have space for, because I have to bring in so many plants every year that it all comes down to who gets to stay and who gets to go.
Right,
so,
right.
I do usually overwinter some of them, but I'm also fine with just harvesting it all and then starting over again. So it depends. They do well inside. So you can extend the season and get more growth of the leaves. It's great to have the leaves available, and then also to have those really fresh roots. I mean, the roots that you get are so different than what you get from the store. They look different. They're very tender. And,
the ginger, especially, I'm seeing it at the farmer's market, and it doesn't look anything like what we see in the grocery store, or in the
it's very tender and bright.
Yes, it's more colorful. It's different. It's really different. Yeah, beautiful. So those are some. And I mean, some of the herbs you grow, I don't even know. I don't even know how to pronounce them. Papalo, pepicha, whatever. I don't even know what some of them are. Gotu kola. I mean, you're like the herbal gardener up there.
Well, I like plants that have multiple uses.
Yeah.
I think that's always come out of having such a small space. I want to get as much as I can. Just, get every drop out of the garden. So herbs are, they're aromatic. It's nice to just be out there and running your hands along them and smelling them. And, of course, you can use them in so many different ways. So I think I have this natural affinity towards herbs particularly.
And many of them are quite beautiful, and they're pollinator friendly. I mean, a lot of things that are in the mint family, for instance, are some of the best attractors for beneficial insects and so forth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we were talking about holy basil. I mean, for years I grew holy basil and didn't even use it myself. I just grew it because the bees love it.
Yes. Well, and Tulsi, is it also called Tulsi, Tulsi?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so a friend gave me a 4-pack of 4 little plants. this spring, and I put them in, and I'd never really grown it. And every time I went by these 4 plants, it was like, whoa, it was a buzz, And if I would touch it, the fragrance was so amazing. And of course, I didn't use it for anything. I just enjoyed watching this spectacle of nature, happening out there. But you do all kinds of things with it, yeah?
Well, with the Tulsi, particularly, I make tea out of it. I drink that every single day. It's very calming for the body.
Do you dry it first, or you use the fresh leaves?
Either or.
Okay.
So I use it fresh in the summertime, and especially the flowers.
Okay.
Because they add more sort of a sweetness to it, and then I dry it for the winter.
Mm-hmm. When you dry it for the winter, like I took my plants out. We were supposed to have a frost last week. We didn't, but I pulled them by the roots and I sort of hung them in a airy place, and so they're dry-ish now. Should I chop them up? Like, do you know what I mean?
Oh, I dry them the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then I just chop it up. I use everything, including the stems, and I just keep them in paper bags because it takes up less space.
And they don't get moldy in there like they might in a plastic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's and you do like infusions, like you do an apple cider vinegar thing with the Tulsi too. Yeah.
Yes, and so infusing it into the apple cider vinegar is also it's another sort of calming. You take a little bit for calming, but it helps with digestion, and it also helps curb like a craving for sweets.
Yeah. Oh, and and like I said, I just can't say enough about it. I haven't really grown it before, and I definitely plan to. That's on my list to repeat. So that was a win. So
there's so many different types of Tulsi too. So.
I know. Horizon Herbs, I guess he has a new name now. Rico Checkout on the West Coast. He's got like an incredible palette of them, assortment of them, among other places. So we only have like 2 more minutes, but I can't believe. But pestos. Let's just have I made my usual pesto, and I had made some garlic scape pesto earlier in the season, and I make a parsley pesto just so I have that as well. But you make it from nasturtiums too, leaves?
Nasturtium leaves. That's the one that I'm doing right now because, as soon as that hard frost hits, goodbye nasturtiums.
Right.
So now's the time to pull out the plants, and you want to cook the leaves very, very slightly.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
In water. I can't think of what that's called.
Blanch.
Thank you.
I'm the girl with the words. You just tell me the concepts.
Time pressure. So blanch them very quickly, and you can use even the large leaves that way. And then make a pesto. It's really good.
Okay, and you freeze it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to tell people, of course, with the transcript of this show, Gala Trail, about your new book that you are working on, Grow Curious, Creative Activities to Cultivate Joy, Wonder, and Discovery in You and Your Garden. Now, what could be better than that, right? And how they can help you to do that, about your Kickstarter campaign and so forth. And meantime, I'm also going to share some of your recipes like that nasturtium one and all of your adventures with herbs. So thank you so much for sharing, as ever, and I'll talk to you soon, yes?
Thanks for having me.
Okay. And I'll talk to all the rest of you again soon, I hope, too, like maybe next week. So don't miss an episode. You can subscribe free to the podcast version on Stitcher or iTunes. You can find me anytime at awaytogarden.com or facebook.com/awaytogarden, and happy gardening meantime.
Away to Garden with Margaret Roach is a joint production of awaytogarden.com and the smallest NPR station in the nation, Robin Hood Radio.